Hi, I'm Fiona Wood. I'm a plastic surgeon in Western Australia. I spend most of my life treating patients who've had burn injury. I started as a plastic surgeon in the UK in the 1980s. And it's amazing for me to be here to say, wow, thank you for giving me this award. The Paws Award Hall of Fame makes me think, it's so interesting that people are interested in my story and what's happened over the last few decades, really. So my story starts as a young kid who is really focused on trying to reduce scarring post-burn injury. I've turned into kind of an old person that's really focused on trying to reduce scarring from burn injury. But along the way, over those decades, we've had some significant success. I saw a young boy in 1985 who was referred to as, I was in a hospital in the south of England, in Queen Victoria Hospital in East Grinstead. It was the home of the Guinea Pig Club from the Second World War, where people had been collected by Sir Archibald McIndoe after their burn injury, these young Air Force personnel, to rebuild them. I saw this young boy there, and he came with a referral that said, he's had his burn, he's now healed, he just needs plastic surgery to rebuild him. And I thought, how could we avoid this happening in the first place? Now, at that time in the 1980s, early 80s and late 70s, they'd started growing skin cells in Boston, in the MIT and in Harvard, and they were taking little bits of skin from areas that were not injured and growing in the laboratory skin cell sheets that were so exquisitely thin, but they could cover much bigger areas. And so they could reduce the time to healing. And I was watching this. This is in times before the internet, so it took 3 months to get the publications through. And I'd read this avidly. And during this period of time, of course, I came to Australia and I found myself finishing my plastic surgery training here. And during that time, very close to the end of my plastic surgery training, I heard that Professor John Masterton and Joanne Padalecki had been to Boston and gone back to Melbourne, and they were growing skin in Monash. At that time, there was a patient at the hospital who was falling through our fingers like sand as we were trying to get the skin healed. The waves of infection were relentless. I rang Joanne and said, I have a patient, I think you could save their life. And a long, long story short, we sent skin to Melbourne. 3 weeks later, Prof and Joanne came back. We were able to effect healing, but we're now some months post-injury. And so sometime later, despite being healed, the patient unfortunately didn't survive because of the infection that was persistent on the inside, in the heart. So I became obsessed with the time to healing. And the following year, I was given the job as Director of the Burns Service of Western Australia. I always say I was the only applicant, so the alternative would have been really awkward. And during that time, I started focusing on how we could grow skin cells, not just in 3 weeks, but in 10 days. And I met Marie Stoner, a scientist I worked with for many years before I now work with Mark Fear. And so we spent the time looking to see how we could do it quicker. We managed to start a laboratory in 1993 with telethon funding. And so with that laboratory, we were able to explore the technology from around the world and add our own ideas. And very quickly, we were growing sheets in 10 days. And then we started to see that, in fact, when the sheets were really fragile, they performed better clinically, because we're in the lab and in the operating theatre, in the clinics, we're all seeing this whole journey. And so then we started to harvest the cells before they became a sheet. And then we've got this soup of suspension of cells. How do we put this on? We made blisters, we put this in gloves for the hand burns, and then one day we said, oh, we should just spray this stuff on. And so Marie and I then did a whole lot of hunting down of different ways of spraying. Nose, throat spray, hair spray, anything you could spray. And then we found a nozzle from an Italian mouth freshener in the pharmacy on Rockaby Road that gave us an opportunity. It clipped onto a standard hospital syringe, and there was no dead space, no wastage at all, and the cells were, more than 90% of the cells were viable coming through the system. And so we started spraying the skin cells on. But then we were doing this at 5 days, but we saw that our patients with bigger burns had paradoxically better outcomes than our smaller burn patients. So how could we take this to the bedside? How could we take the tissue engineering laboratory, put it in a box, take that box to the bedside? And so we built the RECELL kit. And by the end of the 1990s, we were harvesting cells and immediately putting them back, spraying them back onto the prepared burn wounds, using the body as the tissue culture environment. And that all that process was taking 20 or 30 minutes. And so we developed a company that was able to commercialize our intellectual property. We put our intellectual property into a not-for-profit foundation so that the royalties could fund our research into the future. And the rest, I guess, as they say, is history, because Avita Medical is the company now that's commercializing the technology across the world, the point of care, harvesting skin cells for wound healing of the skin, and predominantly burns. And so we have a royalty stream into our foundation, and we do use this technology almost daily in Western Australia, and it's increasingly used around the world. And the time to healing, it gives us flexibility to reduce the time to healing, because we know the sooner they're healed, the less scar, less pain, less suffering, less risk of infection. We've got a long way to go yet. We're still working on 3D printing the skin cells with the frameworks. We've got a lot of opportunities to work at how we can make it feel better, how we can use the brain to drive the nervous system back into the skin so that we have a skin that functions normally. So yes, everything's a journey. The spray-on skin cell story, the development of the RECELL kit is one part of that story. And as I'm sure when you speak to somebody who's passionate about something and you're interested, so thank you very much, Paws Awards, because anyone who's interested, we love to tell our stories. And I'd like to say that, it's ongoing. There's a lot of work to do yet. But as I look back, I'm very proud of working with all the people I've worked with over the years, and particularly proud that we've made a difference to that suffering of those people post-burn injuries. Thank you very much indeed. It is an honour to be recognised. The Paws Awards build better ecosystems by recognising real people who do real things, and I'm so proud to be one of those.